Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this old video, we are taking a little old visit to Canada, because this is a very creepy story, so clearly scary Canada is where it's at. Why can't it be in somewhere normal, like Florida or something? But what happened in the middle of the night, in the middle of a party, was anything but normal. See, Madison Scott had been there. She'd been at a party. Then, she retired to her sleeping bag. What exactly happened then is a mystery, because she wasn't in that sleeping bag a few hours later, and there were no clues as to what had happened. In fact, we wouldn't get any answers to this terrifying mystery for 12 long years, and we still have some questions. So, let's give it a go. Madison Geraldine Scott was born April 29, 1991, to parents Dawn and Eldon Scott. Maddie, as she went by, grew up with her two siblings, Ben and Georgia, and the three of them spent most of their lives in Vanderhoof, right in the heart of British Columbia, where there are a lot of things which can be described as nothing at all. It's a small community, right, covering less than 3 square kilometers, where people have a lot of time to kill. But it does have several mining operations in the area, so that's great. Also, a lot of That Chapter videos have been set around here, so do with that what you will. Here's another one. One reason for there being so many cases set in this vast and remote area is that not far from Vanderhoof lies a road, Highway 16, better known as the Highway of Tears. A road that slithers its way through endless forests, valleys and plains, linking the two princes, Rupert and George. It's 450 miles long and is in such a remote and vast area, well, not a lot happens. Which means quite a lot can happen unnoticed. It was given the name Highway of Tears back in 1998, but the reasoning for it goes back 50 odd years. See, that road, as remote as it is, passes through 23 First Nations communities, and along this road, since the 70s, it's believed that over 40 women have been found murdered or simply disappeared entirely. It's a poverty-stricken area, where drugs usage is wide, money not so, and truckers and other itinerants are hauling ass every single day. It's a place where hitchhiking is the norm, and so many women, some of whom quite vulnerable, can get into a truck and are never seen again. Unfortunately, it would be remarkably easy for serial killers and others with an urge to kill. They'd be able to operate there with impunity in an area that's so endless it's hard to comprehend. Hundreds of kilometers and miles of northern wilderness on each side of that road. A lot of places to hide bodies, and it seems they have. In Madison Scott's hometown alone, Vanderhoof, there have been a number of murders and disappearances linked to the Highway of Tears. In 1976, Corrine Thomas, a 21-year-old heavily pregnant woman, was killed while hitchhiking along the highway. Witnesses would say the driver of the truck that hit her, Richard Redekop, drunkenly swerved to intentionally knock her down. However, as Richard was white and Corrine was Indigenous, those witnesses were soon intimidated by the police to say she had jumped in front of his truck. No charges were ever filed. In 2007, Bonnie Joseph, a 32-year-old mother of 5, was hitchhiking from Vanderhoof to Prince George, when she simply vanished. Her ID and purse, with an uncashed check still inside, were later found on the banks of a lake. What happened to Bonnie, no one knows. In 2010, Lauren Leslie, 15 years old from Vanderhoof, was found murdered along a remote logging road near Fort St. James, north of the town. It would later be determined that she was a victim of That Chapter alumnus, Cody Legabkoff.
What kind of person would do something like that? I'm asking you, what kind of person do you think would do something like that?
Obviously, not a good person.
In 2009, Maddie graduated from Nechako Valley Secondary School. Although she did just fine academically, it was socially where Maddie really shone. She just loved people and would jump into anything that meant socializing, even joining sports teams just for the interactions. Really, she was just a happy young girl who enjoyed discovering who she was, getting piercings and tattoos, just having fun and trying to, live in the moment. She also loved to go dirt biking and horse riding, just being physical and out there. Her brother, Ben, described her as being just as comfortable in a dress as she was in work overalls. At the time our story takes place, Madison was working as an apprentice heavy-duty mechanic for the logging industry alongside her father. So fast forward or rewind to 2011. Maddie, 20 years old at the time, still living in the area, working and hell yeah, partying. May 27th, 2011 landed on a Friday, and Madison, along with her friend Geordie Baldock, headed out in Maddie's Ford F-150 to spend the night at Hogsback Lake. Hogsback is itty-bitty, surrounded by dense forests on all sides. Now, Maddie and Geordie, they didn't really know each other all that well. In fact, they'd barely talked to each other when they'd been in school, never talked to each other outside of class, but they were just those sort of friends who didn't become close during school, but after school, they're like, I actually have so much in common with you. This is wild. This is mad. The invite was unexpected, but Maddie was excited to have a chance to get to know Geordie and go camping. Now, Maddie and Geordie, they were far from alone going to camp at Hogsback Lake. In fact, there was like about 50 people, all going there to party and camp all night. This was a party held the same weekend every year. It was the organizer's birthday. Now, pretty much everybody who attended this party had some kind of link to everybody else at that party. I mean, all were like between 18 and 25, and pretty much all were like locals to the Vanderhoof area. There was a few exceptions, the odd older person, the odd stranger here and then, but you know, the party was like publicly posted, right? So everybody in the area saw it, and I mean, you know, what else are you gonna do? Downtown Vanderhoof. Now, the party died down earlier than expected after a fight broke out close to midnight, and most of the partygoers chose to call it a night and head home. Maddie decided, though, that she'd stay at Hogsback Lake, turn in, and she got settled into her tent and tried to drift off to sleep. She was, at the time, exchanging texts with her father between 11 p.m. and half past midnight. Maddie, she wasn't a big drinker, and so she was happy to drift off by herself in her tent. Geordie, on the other hand, continued to drink by the campfire. Though she had in fact meant to stay camp in the tent with Madison, Geordie actually left the party. She left with her boyfriend at around 1:30 a.m. As she was leaving, though, she stuck the head into Madison, saying, "Hey, I'm heading out. I'm heading off, right? Catch you later." Maddie wasn't actually too happy about that. She was like, "Well, you're kind of just gonna leave me here? Thanks." Geordie then said, "Well, hey, come with us. You know, we're leaving. Come with us." Maddie, though, she didn't want to leave her truck and her tent unaccompanied here at the lake, so she was like, "Well, I'll stay. I'll camp out here. I'll see you in the morning." In fact, as Geordie was leaving, talking like from 1 a.m. onwards, pretty much everybody was leaving. A few more people who were like drifting out at camp, they even popped ahead into Maddie saying, "Hey, you want to come?" Pretty much everybody's kind of gone. You're gonna be here alone. You wanna ride? Maddie said no, she was fine. Now people would say she didn't seem intoxicated, she didn't seem drunk, but she seemed comfy here by herself. In fact, even the party organizers left, saying that when they did, it appeared Maddie was the only person still camping. Now, whether Maddie knew that she was alone, we don't know, because her mother would say if Madison knew she was the only person there, she wouldn't have been there. The last time Maddie was seen was at 2:45 a.m., still in her tent, as the lakeside was dark, silent, and empty. The morning after the party, at around 8:30 a.m., Geordie, her friend, came back to Hogsback Lake, to that campsite, because she had left a couple of things in Madison's tent, and she was due to head into work. Now, the campsite was empty, signs of last night's party still around, and one tent was still standing, Madison Scott's tent. She found the tent and Maddie's white 1990 Ford F-150 still in place, and the tent entrance flap was open, but there was no sign of Madison. Geordie now, she was in a rush, she was trying not to be late for work, and so she grabbed her things without thinking too much about it, and she left. A few other attendees of last night's party, they turned up then mid-morning to clear up the shite that was all around. They noticed her tent was still there, her car was still there, her truck was still there. Maddie was not there. Then that evening, there was another party. So the party was essentially a 3-day weekend, like, festival. So on the Saturday night, there was another party. This time there was like 3 times as many people attending. People who were attending the second night of partying, friends of Maddie as well, they did not see her. During all this time, Maddie had received several texts and missed calls and hadn't replied to anyone. Eventually, her phone battery died and calls would no longer go through. Several people then on the second night, they camped there. Once again, her tent was there the entire time. They didn't see anybody go into it, anybody come out of it. No sign of Maddie at all. It was kind of at that point that everything, clicked together, and Madison's mother Dawn realized Maddie was missing. Obviously, her first call was to Eldon, and the two of them headed to the lake to see if they could find any evidence of where she'd gone to. After all, now Madison, even though she lived in Vanderhoof, she loved horse riding, she was pretty inexperienced when it came to outdoors, so she could have gotten trapped somewhere, her truck broken down, and her phone had died, so she was kind of stuck out there. Unfortunately, her parents, hoping and praying to find her sitting in her truck, frustrated, they didn't see that. Instead, they found her campsite still there. Her truck still there, locked next to her tent. The tent had now been flattened, something which obviously caused her parents great concern. When they looked inside the tent, they found all of Maddie's things still there. Only her iPhone 4 in its distinctive teal case and her truck keys with a Gothic-style lanyard attached were missing. Those were two things she would more than likely have with her at all times. Given that her truck was parked right next to him and the keys being missing, that only made it more obvious that something bad had happened. And as much as Madison could be, impulsive, she often would jump into situations with her 2 feet without thinking too much about it. She would still reply to her parents. She knew they would be freaking out if they didn't hear from her. If she was going off, she would at least text and say, "Hey, I'm fine." Worry was growing every minute, so Dawn called the police, reported Madison Scott missing.
RCMP.
Hi, I'm calling. My daughter's 20. We're at Hogsback, and I haven't heard from her since Friday night. And we just came out, and our pickup is here in the vehicle, and people haven't seen her at all.
Okay, what's her name?
Madison Scott.
And what's her date of birth?
April 29th, 91.
So she was last heard from on Friday?
Friday night, yes.
Okay.
All of her stuff's here, but yeah, I don't know.
Where does she live? With you?
Yes, with us in Vanderhoof.
Does she have a vehicle with her?
The vehicle is here, yes. We are out at Hogsback. I talked to her Friday night, and then we just haven't heard from her yesterday, and her cell phone has been dead.
The truck has been there all the time?
The truck, yes, it has been. We're at the truck and the tent right now.
And no answer on her cell?
No answer. It's been dead, it seems, since yesterday.
The authorities took the situation as seriously as they possibly could right from the off, and they threw every resource they had available at finding Maddie quickly. They really went all in on trying to find her. Within hours of Maddie officially being made a missing person, police, fire and rescue, and a whole shit ton of volunteers were out scouting the area around Hogsback Lake, including in the lake itself. They had divers in there, cadaver dogs on the land, everything they could. Starting at the flattened tent, investigators from the RCMP looked for any sign of what could have happened. Apart from the truck key and phone, the only things unaccounted for in Maddie's possessions were the clothes she'd been wearing the last time she'd been seen.
My name is Dawn Scott, and this is my husband Eldon. We are the parents of 20-year-old Madison Scott. Our daughter Maddie was last seen on Saturday, May 28th out at Hogsback Lake, just south of our hometown of Vanderhoof. While we continue to receive outstanding support from our friends and the community, and the RCMP continues to follow up on information and tips, we have not been able to locate our daughter.
The first thing they were trying to find out was, okay, well, why is her tent flattened? Now, that was solved kind of pretty quickly. There was a guy who had flattened it. It would have been from the party, the second night of partying. Somebody party fell into it, flattened it. It wasn't really a big deal. He was cleared really quickly as not having done anything. The RCMP led a grid search of the area, even bringing in a helicopter and a boat with side-scanning sonar. With no sign of Maddie, house-to-house canvassing of the area started. A Facebook page and a website were set up to take in tips and get the word out about her being missing. No sign was found. Throughout the rest of 2011, searches continued until hardly a stone had been left unexamined. In June, several of the attendees of the original birthday party were given polygraph tests, and police tried to follow up all tips and suggestions that came in, but each one faded out in time. Within just a couple of months, posters with Maddie's image were all over Vanderhoof and the area surrounding the lake. Just as with so many missing persons cases, A day turned into 7, which became a month, and the years started passing by as the days had before, each with no sign of Madison Scott. She had been alone, it appeared, at the campsite after the party, and then after that, just poof. It was like she'd been abducted by aliens. So there was no sign of a disturbance in the tent, no evidence, no clues, no blood, no nothing. Her phone was missing, her keys were missing, she was missing. The flap to her tent was open when Geordie, the first person to stumble across it. So she had left, expecting to come back in. She would have only left it open if she hadn't been expecting to go along. Searched the entire area though, nothing. Her truck was still there. Okay, so she hadn't driven somewhere else. But had she been driven somewhere else? The community and Maddie's family, especially her parents, hadn't given up. Not by a long shot. They wanted to know, good or bad, what had become of their daughter, and if there was even a minuscule chance of bringing her home, they were going to fight with everything they could to make it happen. The family and volunteers worked with the RCMP to keep the search going, organising extra searches, covering British Columbia in signs, bumper stickers and posters. In 2012, they even established what would become an annual poker run to raise awareness of Maddie and to encourage the community to keep her in their thoughts. And all anyone could think of is that big question mark. What happened? But from the searches, it seemed to be probably everyone's leaning towards good old foul play. Then, almost a year after Madison went missing, right in February 2012, 28-year-old Fribion Bjornsson went missing, having last been seen at a 7-Eleven in Vanderhoof, British Columbia. Now, Fribion and Maddie were likely known to each other, but to what extent? No one seems sure. Geordie, Maddie's friend who accompanied her to the party, said that she'd heard rumours that the two had been seeing each other, but wasn't sure about it. Now it appears that was indeed just rumours, there was no relationship. They probably knew each other, but were not in cahoots. You know what I'm saying? I think you do. However, the in cahoots part was small town. 2 people vanished within less than a year of each other. But after Fribion went missing, he did not go on vacay, baby.
We begin with a major break in a local homicide case. The circumstances surrounding the death of Fribion Bjornsson on the Northern BC First Nation were something police couldn't explain until now. The 2012 murder of the 28-year-old Vanderhoof father remains unsolved, but RCMP are one step closer to finding answers. 4 people have been charged in connection with his death.
3 weeks after he vanished, Fribion Bjornsson's severed head was found at a vacant property on a reserve near Fort St. James, about a 40-minute drive north of Vanderhoof. For a brief moment it looked like there might be a link between Maddie's disappearance and Bjornsson's murder, but it was mostly down to hearsay, spreading out of control. Bjornsson's horrific murder was found to be gang-related. It seemed that some real dickheads found out that Bjornsson, he came into a hefty old sum of cash. So he was lured to a house party, then he was taken down into the basement, and he was tortured for his bank details. Only the torturing had gone a lot further than they'd intended, and he died as a result of his injuries. That'll happen when you cut someone's head off, alright. And all the while during the search for Maddie, women kept disappearing or were being killed in that area along that concrete snake nearby. In 2012, April Johnson was shot dead by her fiancé, Kane Penner. At the time, Kane claimed he had accidentally dropped his rifle and it discharged, killing her in the town of Vanderhoof. However, Kane swiftly moved on to another woman, so you can put 2 and 2 together. He was charged with manslaughter and got a whopping 23 months house arrest. In 2013, Tara Williams, 40, was found murdered along with her partner Blaine Barfoot in their Vanderhoof home, from what appeared to have been a robbery gone wrong. In 2020, 2 more women were found murdered in the town, 62-year-old Joy Morris and 28-year-old Cassandra Cale. The people I've been listing, they are simply victims of the Highway of Tears who resided in Vanderhoof. This list is a hell of a lot longer, but the most recent victim of the entire Highway of Tears, she too was from Vanderhoof. 29-year-old Chelsea Qua was last seen in October 2023. Her body was found 1 month later in a wooded area. The case remains unsolved, but it is believed to be a homicide. And so with this constantly happening, not just along Highway 16, but in Vanderhoof, Specifically, so many cases of people disappearing or being murdered in this small community, you can only imagine the fear and the torment Maddie's family were going through. Then, exactly 12 years and 1 day after Madison Scott disappeared, officers from the RCMP reported they had found human remains.
It's taken 12 years, but today there was a major break in the disappearance of a young woman in northern BC. The remains of Madison Scott have now been found.
They were found at a farm just 18 kilometers from where Maddie was last seen alive at the lake. Within days, the bones had been positively identified as belonging to Madison Scott. Despite her being confirmed dead, Maddie's case wasn't immediately changed from a missing persons case to a homicide, as is what usually happens. Given the time that had passed since she went missing, it could be that the cause of death is far from certain and may not even be able to be established now. But right now, at least, that's where things stand with Maddie's case. The RCMP are continuing to investigate and haven't released too much publicly. With how fast things often develop after the discovery of a body, I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something very soon.
In 12 long years, and you know, it's comforting in some ways to know, but obviously thinking of Maddie and missing that part of our community.
Yesterday, RCMP revealed a major breakthrough in the case, announcing they found Scott's remains. They won't say where or how, but they say they have a search warrant on a rural property west of Prince George.
Now, there's been a lot of speculation about the owners of the property where her body was found having been, somewhat involved in probably what happened to her because, they owned where she was found. Because, bit of speculation there. Now, nothing's been confirmed by the authorities, but I'm gonna go out and hazard a guess that, it's not entirely shocking she was found there. Madison Scott is counted among the victims of the Highway of Tears, a place where monsters roamed for years and continue to do so. There have been a number of serial killers who have been linked to cases along that road. Bobby Jack Fowler, part-time transient construction worker, full-time serial killer, he operated there for a time, as did Edward Dennis Isaac. Most recently, as I mentioned at the top, Cody Legabikoff, Canada's youngest serial killer. He was active in that area with 4 victims to his name. I covered his story in a video before, but long story short, he's a real sack of shit.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to wrap your head around it.
Yeah.
Like, do you think there's any reason anything that would motivate a person to do something like that? Like, what would cause a person to do that?
Well, I don't know.
A special group called E-PANA was set up by the RCMP to investigate cases linked to Highway 16, but also really just unsolved cases in the wider area. It began in 2005, and its number of Highway of Tears victims is much lower than what seems to be the realistic number, lower by about half. And although it does cover more cases than just the Highway of Tears, it has had very little success. Is Madison Scott another case that will remain unsolved along this road? So what happened that night at the camp? How did she end up at the farm? Nobody's mentioned the word murder, officially, in this case, but she didn't bury her own body. She was found on a farm south of Vanderhoof, not close to where she had been camping. She wouldn't have walked it, certainly not in the middle of the night. It would have been a 4-hour walk, so yeah, she didn't walk it. Her car was still at the campsite, so she got in someone else's and then something happened. I'm willing to bet that some other people did remain at the campsite after everybody else had left. That Maddie was not alone. Locals who lived near, maybe 1 or 2 guys who also happened to own some property nearby. Who knows? I'm hazarding a guess over here. Her cause of death hasn't even been released. Having said that though, the Canadian police don't tend to release much information when crimes like this occur. Not until the whole thing is finished, trial included. But it is a terrifying story, and now that it's even been partially closed, I don't think it will make anybody sleep better at night. Thank you so much for watching, it really means the world to me. I hope you enjoyed this whole video or found it interesting. Number here for any information about the Madison Scott case. Please check out the That Chapter Patreon if you're looking for early access to videos, exclusive videos, all that kind of stuff. And also I'm on Twitter, Instagram, that whole thing, so give it a go. But until the next whole video, please take care of each other and yourselves, because you know what? Shockingly, I love you. My God.